Hi, my name is Hila Yaffe. I'm going to start with a few words about myself. I have been practicing Chinese medicine for over 25 years now, practicing and teaching. I have a private clinic where I treat my patients with a combination of acupuncture, herbs, and massage techniques. And a few years ago, I established an acupuncture service in the labor rooms of Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. We now have a team of 10 acupuncturists that work in regular shifts alongside the medical staff and give acupuncture treatments to women in all the different stages of labor. I have a master's degree in Asian studies with a focus on the history of Chinese medicine, and my thesis is on the reality of the practice of acupuncture during late imperial China. Um, Today, what I want to talk about is the importance and realizing the importance of Chinese medicine as a living tradition, not only for philosophical reasons, but also because of the practical implications that this understanding has on our own way of practice. In order to do this, we're going to start with a review of the history of Chinese medicine, how it has evolved throughout history. We're going to talk particularly about the Shanghan Lun and how the different stages of history have affected how we interpret and apply the Shanghan Lun in different ways. Then we're going to take 5 formulas from the Shanghan Lun, and I'm going to explain how I use this understanding of a living tradition to apply the formulas of the Shanghan Lun in my own clinic. Um, Now, I think that what basically I'm trying to say in this lesson is that the continuation and clinical success of this healing tradition depends not only on our ability to study and understand the basic concepts, but also on our ability to breathe life into these concepts. Depending on our place in the world, depending on our time in history and the development of medicine in general. I hope you will enjoy this and find it useful. So first we're going to understand with explaining what it means that Chinese medicine is a living tradition. Um, as practitioners of Chinese medicine, we often pride ourselves with being part of an ancient medical tradition. But I think the success of this practice, like I said before, is not just the fact that it's ancient, it's the fact that it is a living tradition. And most of my years as a practitioner, I didn't really understand the difference. Um, and I think it is important to first define what makes a tradition, an ancient tradition, different when life is breathed into it in every period and period in the history of its development. So I think, first of all, we need to understand that ancient traditions often have the habit of becoming irrelevant. Um, Anyone who has learned a practical craft, and medicine certainly falls into this category, knows that there's always going to be a gap between theory and practice. And if the theory or doesn't allow to change, to respond, to adapt to this gap, then the medicine will eventually become detached from reality. Now, one of the amazing things about Chinese medicine is that it has never used its ancient origins as an excuse to freeze in time or place, because we can see that it's also changed geographically according to where the practitioners lived. Um, and it has done this while maintaining continuity with the ancient classics. So now we go to that first point of the slide. To define yourself as an ancient tradition, you of course have to have some ancient origins, and you have to stay in touch with these origins. Now, in the case of Chinese medicine, we have the Neijing, the Nanjing, the Shanghan Lun. These are all texts that were written in the first and second century, and we continue to draw from them. We continue to draw insights from them. We continue to draw inspirations from them. We continue to use many of their concepts, and Mainly, they continue to be our practical guide, our basic guide for the concepts that actually we implement in our clinic. So this, of course, is going to be a very important point of Chinese medicine and how we practice it to maintain this continuity. The second point is how Chinese medicine has been transmitted. Um, the transmission of Chinese medicine has not been a passive acceptance of the classics. It has been an active process of interpreting, criticizing, adapting, and evolving. And this all means that there was an ongoing thinking process that has continued throughout history. And basically, these concepts that came from the ancient classics have not been accepted blindly, and there's always been questioning of what we understand from these concepts, what it means in our clinic. There's always been this going back and forth from theory to practice to see what actually works in practice, and then going back and trying to understand the theory again, and on occasion even making adjustments to the theory so that it fits better to what the practitioners used to see in practice. And this back and forth is the core of Chinese medicine as a living tradition. You're not trying to take practice and make it fit into theory no matter what. You're actually observing the theory in practice. And if it doesn't fit, then you don't try and make it fit. Then you go back and try to understand the theory from another perspective. Now, the last point in this slide is diversity and change, and that is actually the result of a medicine that has evolved as a living tradition. Because there's going to be different practitioners living in different times, different places, they're going to have different personalities and different life experiences, then they're going to be interpreting the medicine each slightly differently. And now we know that we have a lot of different schools of thought, but it's even more than that. It's inconsistencies in our medicine that really characterize it. We all know that if a patient is going to go to 5 different practitioners, they're going to end up with 5 different treatment approaches. And while some actually use this to criticize Chinese medicine and say that is why the theory is so weak because it's inconsistent, I actually see this as a sign of the strength of this medicine. Medicine is not an exact science. And when someone claims that there's only one possible solution to a disease, then that's actually when I tend to get suspicious. The main reason that medicine cannot be an exact science is that disease and health are affected by changing circumstances. Basically, we're all a product of our environment. Our beliefs, our lifestyles, our actions, our habits, they're all going to be affected by the place and the time that we live in, by the people that surround us, by the circumstances and experience that we go through in life. These are all going to affect our healing mechanisms. These are all going to affect how our body responds to diseases in different ways. And that is why concepts of disease and healing are not and cannot be timeless and universal. Um, they are also a product of social, cultural, political, economic, and individual personal influences. And so every time we meet a patient, we have to remember this, that they are also a product of their circumstances, and we have to observe them and try to understand their individual circumstances and how that might be affecting their ability to cope with disease and how that might affect our ability to help their healing mechanisms um, um, activate in a better way. Now, throughout all of this, we should always, always, always go back to the first point, continuity with the ancient classics, and we should always remember to use this as our philosophical, theoretical compass when we're looking at a patient. A simple example is how the world today, which is dominated by science, could actually derail us if we forget these origins. So, for instance, if a patient is suffering from diabetes, we might get off track by looking for herbs that simply lower blood sugar instead of trying to understand how our patient has become diabetic in terms of the yin yang dynamics that in this case are affecting his metabolic processes. So, yes, we need to understand the scientific basic concepts of the disease because that's part of our world. But we also have to remember our medicine and try to understand it and interpret it in terms of our medical understandings. Now, this is a very, very famous quote. You might have already come across this quote. It's a quote by Confucius. It's written in the Analects. And I think it's very, very fitting for the topic of this particular lecture. If a man keeps cherishing his old knowledge so as continually to be acquiring new, he may be a teacher of others. Um, During my years as a teaching Chinese medicine, the question, why do I need to learn the history, would always come up. And I think we often, me included, want the bottom line. Both when using herbs and acupuncture, we've come to depend on predefined protocols because it's easier. And many of them are also effective, so why not use them? And I think as a student, I also really wanted my teachers to stop wasting my time with what each master said and how they argued with each other. And in the end, I just wanted them to tell me what has been proven to be true and what has been proven to be nonsense, and I'll just continue from there. But the thing is, there is no such thing, like I said before, as an ultimate truth when it comes to healing. The right and wrong depend on the situation. And this idea behind cherishing old knowledge, I think we need to understand it from the two sides of how we deal with old knowledge. On the one hand, we shouldn't accept it blindly just because it's ancient. So we need to cherish it and not just blindly accept it. But on the other hand, we shouldn't automatically reject it just because it's outdated. And so this leaves us really with understanding that to cherish old knowledge is to use it as a stepping stone to think. Basically, this is our first line of thought, and we can continue and take it really from there. And the great thinkers throughout the history of Chinese medicine have taught us the value of critical thinking. By learning their ideas, we learn not only their ideas and interpretations and the formulas they wrote, but we also learn how to actually think. We learn how to understand ourselves as a product of our own times by understanding them as a product of their times. We learn how each master's individual life and circumstances influenced his thinking. And by doing this, we will learn the art of observation, the art of critical thinking, the art of adaptation, and the art of innovation, and put that together with the art of healing, and we can become very powerful practitioners.